Okay. All right. So if y'all want to take another couple minutes, feel free, and then we're going to go ahead and get started.
Dan, I don't know that I have the deck that has the actual recommendations we're going to be going through. Is that right?
Those are actually not on the slide deck. Those are going to be in this gigantic spreadsheet that I will link to you.
Okay, cool.
I'll put it here right now.
Thank you.
And I'll explain sort of where we're starting, and people can use that. Yeah. So I want to give everybody an orientation to that before we jump in.
That's awesome, though.
We're going to try to keep this organized. I came in while you were talking about your new arrival, but congratulations. I've got I think I have.
How you doing?
7 more weeks or so till D-Day.
Okay.
So
D-Day. Oh boy.
I don't know. Yeah. B-Day maybe. I don't know.
You're doing B-Day. That's literally what it is. You're doing good though.
That's better. I'm doing good. It's definitely. I'm so glad I can work from home. I couldn't imagine squeezing what's going on here into clothes to like go do this in a meeting room.
Right. Oh boy. Oh, I couldn't.
But no, it's good. It's good to see you back, because I have hope now for like, okay, maybe I'll have some mental capacity, a month or so into.
I'm coming back Monday, so this is a nice ramp up of like, no, you're in a Teams meeting and you're looking at spreadsheets. So
yeah, so you didn't do the full 8 weeks that they give us. I'm
gonna take that in May after budget is adopted, God willing.
Yeah, that
right.
Yeah. This I have the same situation where this baby is poor timing for budget and planning and all of that stuff, but that's cool that they let you break it up.
Yeah.
I'm just glad we get time off at all. Like paid time off is. My husband actually works at a hospital, and he doesn't. They give him 2 weeks, but it's not paid. So
no, like the benefits package is nice. It's very nice.
Oh, good. All right, and other folks in the group, I know some of you have cameras. Feel free to turn them on if you're back, or just give me a thumbs up, and we'll get started.
This is great.
Hey, Adam. So do we have thanks, Doug. Do we have anyone who does not work for either the City of Richmond or Richmond Public Schools in this group? That's fine. The broader community and some of the other working groups will be taking a look at some of this. So this is not, and then you all will have another opportunity to take a look at these things. So this is not the last time that you will see this. This is not the end of strategy development whatsoever. So just as we're getting started, for those of you who I haven't met, I'm Brianne. I'm on this Office of Sustainability team. Been helping with all aspects of this RVAgreen 2050 planning process. So I put a couple of links in the chat. The first one is the RVAgreen 2050 equity screening tool, which we worked on with you guys back in January to draft. And this is what we're going to be using today to consider how to make our draft strategies more equitable and inclusive, and consider more community priorities, which will just help make our plan overall more relevant to the community and achieve more buy-in. The other link that I put in, the second one, is to a Google spreadsheet, which I wanted to provide a little bit of orientation to. You can open this if you would like, but I will be taking all notes and things, so you don't have to worry about doing that if you don't want to. But the Google spreadsheet, if you do take a look at it, is divided up by the RVAgreen 2050 working groups. And right now it literally has all of the draft strategies for all working groups in various stages of development. I'll add that because you guys are the first group to be going through this process of sort of like refining strategy language. It also has a couple other things that we will use as needed. And again, I'll take all notes so you all don't have to feel like you need to navigate this huge spreadsheet. But on the first tab of the spreadsheet, we have the draft structure for RVAgreen 2050, which you've seen a bunch of times. We have a couple other sort of resources. And then the last tab of the spreadsheet is actually a beginning of like a glossary. And we wanted to start this from the beginning of our process so that we made sure, you know, we are going to be using some technical terms, especially at the strategy level. And as things come up that we, you know that we need to use some sort of technical term, but it's not sort of in layman's language, let's say, let's add it to what will eventually become a glossary for the plan itself. So that's broad sort of orientation. And then I'm going to share my screen on the piece of this that we will be concentrating on for the next however long it takes us to do this exercise. And then like Dawn said, if we finish early, y'all are welcome to go back into the main group and go to a different objective. So hopefully this does not look too overwhelming. And as we work through this, I think it'll get easier to understand what we're trying to do here. But we are looking at objective 1. So what I have open now and what I'm sharing is the buildings and energy tab of our strategy drafting spreadsheet. And right now I'm just at the top of that, which is objective 1, which is about achieving climate neutrality and increasing resilience in government buildings, infrastructure, and operations. So the content that is in column B here is the result of our staff, mostly Dawn, Wendy, and Alicia, taking all of your ideas and comments and sticky note exercises and stars and X's and all of that from the last couple of activities and drafting at least a kind of revised starting point for creating strategies for RVAgreen 2050. What we're going to do today is go through each of these. So we have, looks like about maybe 15 or so to go through. And we're going to do 2 things. We are going to make sure that the strategy language is actually strategic. So making sure that it meets our definition at this point of what a strategy is, which is an actionable program or policy or something that we can say at some point, yes, we have done that. And it's specific enough that we kind of know like how we're going to do it. We don't need all the details right now though. So that's step number 1. And we will make I will take notes on any revisions to the language in this column C here. And then step number 2, which we'll do after we kind of go through and kind of refine the language, we'll be going through the actual equity screening tool. And what we'll do is kind of go column by column and think about, okay, for column D, we're looking at community wealth as one of our community priorities. This is about jobs, workforce development, jobs access, things like that. Are there any of these strategies that might help us to address any of those community priorities? If so, let's identify how. If not, maybe let's see how we could embed some of that into the strategies. So that's broadly what we're going to be doing for the next probably hour or so. So unless y'all have any questions, I'm just going to jump in and it'll get easier to kind of follow what we're doing, I think, as we do the first couple. Anybody have any questions before we get started? No. Okay.
Real quick. How are we handling glossary terms? Like, should we be highlighting, just off the top of my head, don't know what portfolio manager is, but just general things like that.
So you can do one of 3 things. There's a lot of ways you could. So there's also, I'll move this over. So if you have the spreadsheet open, you are welcome to type over here in the notes and comments, and you could say, need to define this or add this to glossary or any other comments you have. I will also be capturing all of that stuff. You could also, if you want, just go straight over to the glossary tab. And this is literally just a brainstormed list that we have so far, and just add a term. You don't have to define it. That'll just be our signal to know like, okay, we need to add this to our list. The third thing is just let me know. We need to define this, and I will do one of those other two things for you. Good question, though. So feel free to explore. This is a group effort at this point. So any other questions before we kind of dive into this first one? No? Okay. All right, so let's just go ahead and get started. And again, the first thing we're doing is literally looking at the language of each of these draft strategies and determining whether it is strategic, so like it's an action we can actually take, versus something like just, increase efficiency in buildings. That's not a strategy. We are looking for it to be ambitious, but also realistic, which is going to be kind of a subjective judgment call, but those are the things we want to think about. So the first one here is benchmark energy use in all city buildings using Portfolio Manager, which Jeff, you flagged is definitely something we need to define. Post scores on a public portal and set goal to achieve Energy Star certification for all buildings. So does anyone see an opportunity to make this more strategic, or does it sound overall like something that is a strategy? And I'll just say, this one sounds pretty good to me. This is pretty specific. This is something we can definitely like put a date on and be like, yep, we did that by that date. It has, there will be someone responsible for this. I think this looks good to me, but any other thoughts?
Just, I guess, looking just real quick, did a search on Energy Star certification. And, one thing I guess that jumped at me is it says it's an annual, certification is given on an annual basis. And
sounds expensive.
Certification application must be verified by a licensed professional engineer. And
right.
So it's not a one and done, potentially a moving goalpost as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an annual certification, essentially. Like if we say we want to set a goal to achieve Energy Star certification for all buildings, it'd be an annual like effort to recertify, it sounds like, every building.
Yes.
And Robert, would that be building by building individual certification is how I'd envision it, as opposed to broadly for the city, which sounds like a lot of different administrative work?
Yeah, I would read this as a building by building. So City Hall would be one building, the DPU Operations Center would be another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one thing we could do is potentially keep, for example, the first part of this, which is, I'll fix this, up to the Energy Star part, and maybe, so I put in the comments, you pointed out that Energy Star is an annual thing that could be, one, costly, two, administratively kind of a nightmare. Maybe there's a better option for some sort of like, I don't know, indication.
Broader.
Yeah, that we're doing a good job. We don't have to come up with that right now, but maybe it's something broader than Energy Star certification.
Or
Yeah,
have a
having
building size.
On the 3 schools we just built, I guess a number of years ago, the city had council adopted a resolution, saying we want, all new buildings to, be certified as LEED Silver, and they also had a provision in that resolution that they would revisit it every 3 years, and it's been probably 10 years and they haven't ever revisited it. And then U.S. Green Building Commission has moved the goalpost on silver to make it more arduous to obtain and more expensive to obtain. And so.
Okay. And Jeff, I think you were pointing out that LEED is also an expensive certification kind of process.
Yeah, that's very much so. What I'd be wondering is I would think a little bit of research would yield something that it would be a problem for a plethora of cities, right? So I would think that there is some kind of energy certification either on a broader level for the city as a whole, or alternatively that we could identify, and you have to be tricky about or intentional about what words you select. Is it by the size of the structure, by the, you know, it's key to being a resilient Richmond of the structure, et cetera, and say, these 7 buildings we want to know that we are energy certified for, as opposed to smaller buildings like EDI, things of that nature.
I would say maybe an option to, not to water it down, but to soften it, rather than say achieve Energy Star certification, might say to meet Energy Star guidelines.
Yeah.
That way you're not beholden to the little cottage industry that, you know, like LEED has become, you know, with kind of a, I don't know.
A cabal?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I think the important part of this strategy isn't so much the merit badge, that certification, but it's about that openness on the public portal, that we're putting our cards out there, that we're showing where we're at. I think that's more key to transparent government than saying, look, we got this merit badge that cost a bunch of money, you know?
Yeah. Okay, I think that's great. And actually, Jeff, while you're talking on that, I'm going to put that this does address government accountability because of the transparency sort of factor here. So we check on that one. Okay, so I feel like that's a good sort of, you know, we don't have to come to the exact language for all of these things.
Right.
You know, I don't want to wordsmith with you guys. That is painful for everyone. So I think at this point we have enough of a starting point. And if y'all are comfortable, under this revised language, we sort of have a strategy plus. We got to figure out some, you know, the what's, you know, the realistic part maybe of this. So if y'all are good, we can move on to the next one. Good, cool. So next one is develop a municipal energy management program using Energy Cap and Portfolio Manager to benchmark, evaluate, and improve building energy use. Make information available via public dashboard. So do y'all, I'm not an expert on this. Is this different from the first one?
I think it's benchmark versus move forward.
Oh, I got it.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how I read it.
Okay. So it's not just put the information out there, then you have to do something about it. Okay. All right. Well, I think then this doesn't get into any of the certification stuff. So any comments on that one?
Consistent language in public portal use. You know, is that a branded portal you guys are going to develop or something like that? Is the only thing I would add.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Perfect.
And with that one too, I guess both the first couple in tandem there, and I like that you say identify a set of buildings to achieve, because, you know, someone uninformed might just look at a building, like take one of our DPU pump stations or streetlight substations.
Right.
You know, from a map, you know, an aerial photo, it just looks like a building. But, you know, when you try to compare it to a building that's really just doing hot water and space heating, I've got, you know, say Jank Road Pump Station, I got 600 horsepower motors in there pumping water, or a streetlight substation is feeding power to streetlights in a broad swath of the city. They're, you know, really not an apples to apples comparison with, you know, with a, say, Rec and Parks building that's, you know, that's just providing hot water and space heating and lights.
Yeah. Good point. And I think not to get, you know, we don't have to get too deep into this right now, but one thing that I might save for like a later thought is in my last sustainability office job, I was working at a university, and what we did was separate our buildings for our energy management plan by use, and then benchmark those buildings against each other, because it's sort of similar. Like our lab buildings use so much more energy than like our office buildings versus like classroom spaces and stuff like that. And that might be potentially something we could do. And then we could also benchmark against, you know, what are pump stations doing across the country? Are we doing good or not? You know, something like that. So that could potentially, that way people too wouldn't maybe look at a dashboard, and maybe there could be some context there to say, well, relative to average office buildings, we're doing great. Relative to all city buildings, it's terrible. You know, I don't know, whatever. Okay. Any other thoughts, ideas on these sort of like municipal energy management program benchmarking kind of ones?
The only thought I had, and this again, maybe getting too far into the weeds, and whether I'm not sure if it's going to be written into this implementation that we can revise these specific strategies, but I guess I just wonder the specific call outs for energy cap, and I also don't know what portfolio manager is, but whether several years down the road, we're still even using those systems, and if we're beholden to that specificity. Again, if we've written into this that we can revise and adapt these strategies, then it may not make a difference. But
yeah,
I'll back him up there saying you don't want Betty Burrell coming. Have you already chosen the software that you're going to use to do this citywide? Because then we have procurement issues.
Yeah, and like I say, I'm not sure how we got energy cap, but I know we're using it. Dawn has shared it with me. I've got logged in. I've been in there. I've played around with it, and you know, it's beneficial. I mean, I think we've been able to look and spot some things that have helped us. You know, maybe we're not on the right rate schedule, or look at. She's asked questions. Why is the power consumption on this station gone up in the last few months? And some cases it's operational issues that have driven that, or but so it's a good tool. I mean, it's
And Adam, I think to your point, the intention with this plan is that there will be flexibility for sure to allow for new technology, edits down the road. Like this is going to be something we revisit. I mean, the plan right now is like every 5 years, not to do a whole nother planning process, but to at least do a comprehensive review of everything we have, benchmark it against our greenhouse gas emissions reduction, that sort of thing. So, but I put that in just so that thought doesn't get lost, because that might be something we want to make cross-cutting about, across the plan. Okay, so I do want to keep us moving. So let's go to row 6 here, which is create a cabinet level energy manager position reporting directly to the CAO to work across all of this stuff. Any language refinement there, or general comments? All right, we can come back if y'all think of anything, but I'm going to take that as like, we can live with that for right now. All right, row 7, retrofit municipal buildings to be more energy efficient. Again, using portfolio manager, we'll kind of keep our asterisks anytime these specific programs are mentioned. To target those buildings provides the highest return on investment in terms of cost savings and greenhouse gas emissions first. Jeff, thumbs up.
Yeah, that's great, because it doesn't just say retrofit. It says make, educated retrofits based on modeling output, which is great.
And cost benefit, yeah.
Right.
Right. Okay. Number 8, develop municipal energy management plan that identifies opportunities to reduce climate impacts in all city operations. This one might need some tweaking. I haven't read these, I'll just tell you. So I'm saying this at the same time y'all are.
Seems overly general.
Yeah, very broad.
Isn't that what we're doing right here, right now?
Yep, exactly. Right. So what do you think this means? How can we make it more specific?
Revisit municipal energy management plan.
Because we have one?
Because we're developing that now. And what you talk about is if we do an assessment every X years, which if we had a cabinet level energy manager position,
that'd be there. their gig. And opportunities to reduce climate impacts. That to me means one of two things or both. One would be looking for opportunities in addition to buildings that where we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions. For example, well, no, what would that be?
Well, it gets into heat island effect, perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, that makes more sense maybe.
Green roof, water, clean water, clean air.
Okay. So maybe it's the additional, we need to be more specific about, because all these other ones talk about greenhouse gas emissions. So maybe these are the other kind of like co-benefits / considerations to make related to the energy management plan.
Potentially that identifies additional opportunities. So that kind of covers us if there is some kind of novel technology or strategy that comes out in 3 years, that means that there's always somebody who is looking for the next best thing to implement into our living plan, as opposed to here it is, it's stagnant.
Yes.
And I wonder, should it even, rather than municipal energy management plan, should it be broader, say municipal government operations or something that, even look at like what we're doing now? Do we post-COVID have, some more flexibility to work from home and, cut down on the amount we commute? And I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that, and I wonder if it's worth even almost combining it with, was it number 5, or I guess the second one down, but row 5, the program and plan, they seem like they may be sort of speaking to the same thing.
Yeah, and we could make this, I kind of like the idea, Robert, of making this a broader thing. So if we have, essentially strategy in row 5 is the municipal energy management program specifically, then I don't know what the right language is to use here, but something like broadening this to city operations, since that's the strategy. The original one is a little strange because it starts with an energy management plan and then it says all city operations. So right. I'm not sure where the focus is supposed to be here.
I added municipal energy management plan to the glossary list because I think it all comes down to how you define what that actual plan is and what it does.
Yeah. Okay. And this one might be a candidate for more refining too, especially, maybe the other work, objectives have some language around climate impacts and what that means more specifically that we could align across the whole thing. So, but for now, any other comments on this one? No. Okay, cool. All right. So this one, I remember. Phase out fossil fuel dependence in all city agreements and contracts. Give preference to companies that reduce the city's energy footprint when awarding contracts. Yeah. So I'll just give you sort of some, in case this is helpful. Right now, in terms of calculating the city's carbon footprint / greenhouse gas inventory, we only look at literal sources of greenhouse gas emissions. So the electricity we use, the fuel we use for vehicles, things like that. We have not yet looked at sort of, I don't know what the word is, downstream or something, or upstream, I have no idea. The impacts of like our contracting on our total sort of the greenhouse gas emissions that we influence because of how we conduct our business. So for example, we don't go through our contracts and say, well, this company for whatever job, they have more green vehicles. So their overall impact with this contract would be less in terms of the climate impacts than this other one, which has all like old diesel vehicles or something. We don't yet do that. So I think this is maybe starting to get at.
And I'm not even sure it's legal to do that right now.
Right.
Yeah, I have no idea, but I think that might be what this is starting to get at, is maybe quantifying and then seeing how we could put that in as a factor, maybe in how we conduct our business.
I mean, and as a DPU person, I still got concerns with a couple of these where, I mean, we are still an operator of a natural gas utility
Right.
that, provides, in a relatively, compared to, coal and some other, a cleaner alternative. It is still a fossil fuel.
Right.
But, it's domestic, it's affordable, and
Best being
and
the
it
enemy of the good.
provides a source of revenue to the city's general fund as well.
Mhm.
So
And I'm pretty
couple
sure
of these, I
there's,
don't know
yeah,
politically how palatable they're going to be.
yeah. And I think there's more strategies related specifically to the utility. I don't know, in this objective or maybe another one, because I know that's been a conversation that like our sustainability manager, Alicia Zatkoff, is having with folks at different levels. I have no idea. But so that's definitely.
A couple of these kind of read we should be pounding the nails into our own coffin, but yeah.
I think for this one thing, give preference to companies that reduce the city's energy footprint. They don't get preference for reducing the footprint, but what they should get in any RFP is additional consideration or points. The preference is not built entirely. The preference should be based on value. As it stands right now, in DPS, we have so many things that are necessary but simultaneously extraneous to the city achieving value. So I think it's important to say that it doesn't give you preference. It is it's truly a tiebreaker, something that gives you a marginal point, but preference is a little strong there and would get some kickback from various departments, but it should be considered.
And it can certainly be applied, perhaps to procurements done through the RFP process. I think it's a bit more challenging on the majority of things that are procured through the bid, hard bid process that doesn't have a subjective component. It's just, you're the low bidder.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The implementation of this strategy to me would be that every competitive proposal ask applicants to provide background information, links, etc., into what you guys are doing towards this end. So if we're trying to choose between company A and company B, I can say, hey, Alicia, Brianne, etc., check out these two. Let me know what you think is the more wise investment of awarding a contract. I think it's key that we're asking that question of every procurement that we make above the $10,000 threshold that they just moved, or whatever it may be.
I think that's a great way to make this a lot more specific too. So, and it's a good starting point, instead of, I think it's a good starting point to start getting people used to asking those kinds of, receiving that kind of information, being asked those kinds of questions, like sort of how, municipal bond companies now are at least asking about, like, well, what do y'all think about climate change? Are you preparing at all? It's not really affecting scores yet, but it will eventually.
Right.
I wonder on that, and again, not getting into the legality of what we can specifically include in our criteria, but you mentioned that they weren't included in any of the benchmarking, and I wonder if that might be a first step, is to try to quantify or benchmark what some of these impacts are.
That's true.
I mean, we're sort of applying a solution before we recognize that there's a problem, and I'm sure there is. I'm sure that there would be a positive impact, but
But a back of the envelope assessment of what our contractor's output might be beneficial, you know, what gets measured gets managed, et cetera.
Yes. And I don't know what to call this, but so I'm writing down what I will remember is like, oh yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Like
But I think that's
ripple
good.
effect.
Yeah. That way too, we would be able to say, well, you know, based on this other strategy, this top one, we have reduced by this amount, or, you know, or this amount of reduction would get us this amount of saving. I have no idea. So yeah, I think that's a good point.
And to that same point, and just sort of playing devil's advocate, there may also be an increased cost to the city as a result of this, and so we may be prioritizing phasing out or reducing fossil fuel consumption, but we may also in turn be spending more on some of these procurement deals, and that. But again, we wouldn't know any of that until we get a baseline assessment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's keep moving, just so we don't run out of time. All right, so row 10, catalog all buildings in the city connected to Richmond Gas Works and develop extensive such plans to convert buildings to all electric with a goal of phasing out the utility. Okay, here it is. By 2050.
That's the one I got the most problems with.
Or converting it to an energy efficiency clean energy provider instead.
I mean, I guess I could support cataloging the buildings and developing plans to improve the energy efficiency of those buildings, but you know, I think in two, it assumes that the electric grid is going to be 100% clean, into which is a nice thought, but it may or may not come to pass. That, you know, right now, I mean, a decent part, maybe a fifth or so of the power is provided by nuclear, and those plants, I mean, gosh, I mean, my degree's in nuclear engineering, and you know, we haven't built a new nuclear plant in this country in, you know, 40 years probably now.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the French.
Plants that are still running were 20 years old at that point. So I mean, they're not going to stay around forever. And I think as they reach, you know.
And as Bob said earlier, there are major financial implications to phasing out a money-making utility to other operations of the city, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. And we, you know, I think this is complicated for sure. So what I'm kind of envisioning, at least for this stage of thinking, is that we separate this into more digestible and realistic things that we could maybe attach some timelines to. So we have we're not doing the timelines right now, but eventually. So we have sort of the cataloging. We have the efficiency part, which I think is sort of addressed in the earlier strategies in this objective, you know, just efficiency in general, but maybe there's something to be done related to like natural gas efficiency specifically. I don't know. And then maybe there's a separate sort of, the last sort of strategies around developing more, you know, I don't know what it is, concrete like steps or assessments or something. You know, we know that in order to reach our net zero greenhouse gas emissions goal by 2050, that the natural gas utility either needs to be offset or needs to not be here. But we don't know exactly how that's going to work. So at this point, I'm not sure that we could develop an actual strategy to get us there, because there's so many unknowns. So maybe it's like a strategy that is down the road at some point, or I don't know, some kind of assessment that needs to be done. I don't know what that is. I don't think that's happening with this plan. it's because we don't have, at least on our team, like the expertise, I think, to answer those kinds of questions. So those are my thoughts.
I guess I saw an article a couple of weeks ago, I think, that, or I guess a lot of cities are kind of doing sort of the same thing we are, and some of the trade groups like the American Gas Association is starting to lobby and push back hard on some of the, you know, proposed legislation to, you know, kind of kill, you know, the use of natural gas, you know, so.
I think we can Elmo this one. Is that, because this is a tough one, we might want to move on. But
Yeah.
I think your part of breaking it up is critical.
Okay. Yeah, it's definitely above my pay grade to make these decisions. Yeah, especially when it comes to city budget. I mean, that's the funny thing, you know, like my position is funded by that gas utility, which is awesome. Okay, so we can definitely come back to this. I think for now,
I think there's a role. I mean, you look at a period like we had a week or two ago where we went like almost a whole week where the sun didn't shine. We had heavy overcast. The temperature hovered around 32 degrees for almost the whole darn week.
Yeah.
Then you had snow and ice on the ground. You know, if you had 100% solar or wind, how is that grid going to perform under those circumstances?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Battery storage.
And if cars are going to go from gasoline to electric, there's another big surge in demand.
And we don't have anybody from aren't the rapid spin up stations that they can generate electricity at peak when they need them, aren't those largely natural gas based? The ones that react to kind of small shifts in demand. So
yeah, and even I think most utilities are, you know, anything they had that was coal or oil fired has over the past decade or so been probably converted to natural gas.
Right.
Or those that haven't are probably on their way being phased out and replaced by something else. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, let's keep moving. We can come back to this if needed. All right, number 11. We're almost there, sort of. All right, evaluate municipal facilities to identify green roof candidates. That's fun. Develop green roof design guidelines. Cool. I think we did this a few years ago with like a rooftop solar assessment. So I'm guessing this would be something similar where we look at our portfolio of buildings and there's some sort of criteria. Any comments on this one?
Just so long as the actual, and green roofs are sexy and they're fun, but just so long as another group is making recommendations for strategies that actual focus on solar passive design, et cetera, in the landscaping, not on the roof, you know, on the level that we operate at, I think is going to be critical. But that's my only comment for that one.
Yes, that is the so the environment group is addressing like city property and like green space, tree canopy, plantings, that kind of stuff. Is that? But is that getting at what you just said, Jeff? Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure.
That's good. Yeah.
Another one that adds cost, though. I mean, we've got a couple of green roofs at the wastewater plant, and I know originally they were hoping to put a green roof on 1801 Commerce, you know, several years ago, but when the cost for that project started escalating, you know, that was probably one of the early things on the chopping block.
Right.
So maybe we add, because it says green roofs in areas that will benefit most from increased green space. I think we should add benefits should include cost, like the calculation of benefits should include cost reduction in terms of like energy usage or something. And then also there needs to be something I think about within this strategy, maybe about funding mechanisms for this, like grants and, you know, stuff like that. We'll make this more specific, but
Because this doesn't say, hey, we're going to build green roofs. This says, if we have money to build green roofs, we have the top 10 candidates of where that impact will be most measurable as far as return on ROI for the project itself. I think that's critical to note.
Cool. All right, let's keep moving. Require all new municipal building construction to achieve net zero energy efficiency. I think it's supposed to be just energy, but I'm not sure. Net zero energy,
Yeah.
like it produces as much energy as it uses or something. I'll just put a comment there and see.
Yeah, that's net zero energy via efficiency. I don't know.
Obviously there's no timeline at this point or anything like that, but any comments, revisions for this one?
I mean, it's a good goal. It's got a cost to it, though. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think I saw an article. It's probably been a while, but I guess where some McDonald's down by Disney World in Florida, I guess, became the first McDonald's restaurant to achieve net zero. And it was it was not a cheap looking building. I mean,
yeah. Okay. So we'll leave this for now. We'll come back if needed. We'll be back to this in a few minutes too. All right. So this one I don't understand. So hopefully one of you all does. Incentivize conduct of blower door and duct leakage testing in all new construction. I'm guessing this is supposed to be city construction, or maybe we need to move this to a different objective. I have no idea.
Yeah, that's pretty much, I have some minor knowledge about that. That's if all the windows are shut, everything's how it should be. On the front door, you put a big
blower. Yeah.
And it measures the gaps in your HVAC system or in the building envelope itself. This is a super technical one. I don't know why we would be incentivizing ourselves to do things. When I hear incentive, I hear a financial thing that gets put on the lever to make you do it. We're either going to do that or we're not. We're not going to incentivize ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's already kind of part of like the LEED process. We did this on the 3 new schools we just commissioned here.
And I think, Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, you actually want to have a little bit of leakage, not in the HVAC system, but in the building envelope for other purposes as far as off-gassing, things of that nature. So this is a super specific one in the order of the list that they've been presented in to me.
Yeah, I think this might actually be for a different objective around private buildings. That would make more sense to me in terms of what it's referring to, because also if we're talking about city buildings, one, we don't need to incentivize ourselves. Well, I don't know. But two, we've already talked about all the energy management stuff. So I just put a note that I think this is supposed to go somewhere else. And for our purposes, I'm just going to make it a little darker so that we can.
Yeah, it's really just kind of a tactic to achieve some of the other things that are already stated as goals.
Yeah.
Strategies. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, convert all city-owned streetlights to LED or solar, which I feel like is sort of happening slowly. But this was a strategy that came out of Richmond 300. I do know that.
And this is one specific to the equity training that we did. I believe where they talked about streetlights and safety and where are we changing the streetlights? Because if we're just changing streetlights in the museum district and West End and not in our South Side neighborhoods, our East Side neighborhoods, it's important how we do that. I don't know that gets written into it, but it is important to equity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that is the next thing we're going to be doing anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and add some language here. Prioritize, I don't know.
Disenfranchised neighborhoods or whatever you guys will wordsmith that, right?
Yeah, that's what we've been using. And what we can So that sort of is like a catch-all language. What we could do is see where are there the most streetlight outages already, start with those things, that kind of stuff. So I think that's a great,
Yeah, I love your
prediction.
311 mapping. That would be a great one for that.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, other than the upfront capital cost, I'm really not quite sure why we're moving as slowly as we are on that.
Right.
I mean,
Mhm.
the energy efficiency, consumption reduction is pretty dramatic, and the life of those is longer, so they would cut down on maintenance, which
Mhm.
means fewer
Right.
truck trips, having to go, change lamps and.
Yeah, cool.
Just because an old-fashioned lamp has 6 months left on it doesn't mean you shouldn't go bing, bang, boom right down the line to save efficiency on sending out a ladder truck,
All right, well, this sounds like a good one. Okay. 15, work with electric utility to relocate overhead utilities underground. Okay, this is interesting. So we had this same thing for the environment group. And what I did was actually took this off because Dominion is burying power lines. I don't know if they plan to do it for the whole city or anything, but this one to me relates more to tree canopy than it does to municipal operations. So the environment group has this exact same strategy. If y'all are comfortable, we can just take it off of this list. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything to do with city buildings necessarily.
No.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing we do is identify the great streets through Richmond 300.
That's true. Yeah. So maybe I could add that language actually to that one because we didn't have that.
Yeah, and they go through and butcher trees when they.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
My poor oaks.
Okay. Establish assessment guidelines for public infrastructure that ensure resilience to current and future hazards.
That's very broad. Is that achievable, or is that summarizing everything we're doing here?
I think it's the second thing that's like just what we're trying to do. So,
Right.
Some of that I think is already really in place between building codes and requirements for, developing in floodplains, and building code gets into seismic stuff and wind load stuff. And
now what you could do if you wanted to edit this into something that was more about transparency is sharing exactly what those codes Robert's talking about, that we comply as a city, we comply with these floodplain regulations, we comply with these building code, international building codes, etc. But we don't need to identify them, do we? We already follow those. It's just about communicating what we follow. My rambling makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we develop a new piece of infrastructure, that that assessment happens as part of the design process.
Right.
What is that?
Permitting process.
Does the assessment process include, like, does it have like how far out you're looking in terms of potential impacts, like, certain number of decades or anything like that? So for example, it'd look different if we were evaluating like, I don't know, a pipe or something for like the 10 years versus the 50-year picture of what our precipitation is going to be. I don't know.
I guess the current is obviously, I think, encompassed by the codes in place. The future, I guess, would be the part if you're going to go.
But those codes are kind of
above the current wind load, or
Right. There's not a number of those different codes, and you can pick the one that's the most progressive as far as it being future looking. It's kind of, correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like this is what you follow. There's not a lot of picking and choosing. Is that correct?
No, I mean there's a current iteration of building code or whatever that's in effect at any given time. But that's not like, say, okay, if a certain, say, hurricane wind velocity requires you to use a certain size
Window.
steel beam in the structural analysis of your building, that, if you're thinking that, hey, that wind load is going to go up by 20% 50 years out, that, you could make the investment to upsize that.
Mhm.
Again, it comes with added cost.
Right. And you'd have to be very specific on where that would occur. It's not just, we do 10% more across the board. That's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this needs to potentially be separated into two maybe strategies. I don't know. One about, I think it's great. Actually, a lot of what we communicate with the public is like, they'll say something, will be like, oh, that's already part of, this thing that you didn't, that we just people don't know about, whatever. So I think that's like part one. And then maybe part two is something about the future looking. I don't know. We haven't really, we don't have like a quantifiable goal of climate resilience, like we need to be resilient to 2070 impacts or something like that. So it's a little tougher there to establish like some sort of guideline, but maybe there's something that could be refined later on that. For now though, let's keep going. All right. This one I think is another one that can be moved just from my initial read. Implement green infrastructure measures and other measures outlined in the RVH2O plan and the clean water goal to improve water quality and reduce stormwater runoff. So in the environment group, we have an entire objective around improving and enhancing resilience around extreme precipitation and flooding. Several of the strategies refer to either continuing to implement or making more ambitious the RVH2O plan and the various like water quality, green infrastructure, all of that stuff, including on city property. So if y'all are comfortable, I think we can leave that for now, at least to that group. The final organization of all of this is still yet to be determined, but we can cut this off, I think, if that's okay. Okay, so, and let me make a note of that too. Okay. Identify infrastructure with the greatest risk on climate vulnerability assessment to prioritize resilience projects. Okay. The second part of this is interesting, but this is something that I actually think could be made more specific. So last time in our last meeting, I gave a pretty quick overview of our climate vulnerability and risk assessment results. And one of the things that we kind of determined along the way is that the city has so many, we're referring to like city property here. The city has so many different, properties, some with buildings, some not, different uses, all of that stuff, that I think potentially a more specific city property related assessment would be a valuable, first step in then achieving, increased resilience. That's what I would propose here for the actual strategy, is to do that first and then develop specific strategies around resilience of city properties that also like look at funding, stuff like that. So does that sound all right to you guys?
I guess I don't understand the last back half of that.
Yeah, I don't know
strategy about use a percentage of stormwater fees to create a resilience fund when we're in a thing that's talking about government buildings.
Right. Cut that.
Okay.
We have a problem as a city where we love to say, and we're going to take half of the money from real estate and that's going to go to schools, or we love to set aside this money. And that gives us all kinds of problems with special funds, et cetera. Where at the end of the day, when we need to tighten our belts, well, half of this has to go there and 10% of that has to go there. And we find ourselves, less resilient because we can't move money from different pots because it's all spoken for. So from a finance perspective, and I think from a budget perspective, that might need to be struck.
And from a technical perspective, the stormwater utility really has two main missions. One is flooding control and the other's improving water quality. And
Right.
their needs and requirements are far outstrip their current level of funding.
Right. And being a new utility in and of themselves, essentially, relative to some of our other utilities, of course. But they have their own things they need to be spending their special fund, their funds
Dedicated
on.
fund, right.
Exactly.
Okay, that all makes sense to me. We don't even know at this point what we'd even be spending the money on, so
Exactly.
we'll do the kind of assessment part first. Okay. Let's keep going. Analyze sources of upstream methane leakage and essentially eliminate leaks. And that's in upstream methane leakage is where we get the natural gas and
Yeah, I
how
would
it comes
assume
into
it
the
would be
city?
the pipeline operators, which, boy, that's just way out of our scope of control.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's not the city that.
No, I mean, we buy natural gas, I guess, off of, I think, a Columbia transmission pipeline and another VNG pipeline, and they get it from other,
Right.
multi-state pipeline systems and coming all the way up from the Gulf or,
Right.
so.
That would be lobbying across the street in order to get that methane levels reduced, but we're beholden to the access that we have regionally.
I mean, that type of stuff, if it's going to be done, should be done at the federal level.
Right.
Because it really cuts across states and,
Okay, got it. All right, so for now, we can just disregard this one. I'm comfortable with that.
the pipelines, it'll come by rail car. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's just going to be more expensive to get it if it emits less methane. But Brianne, I want to use this as a point to show something that's completely non-related, but we do need as a city a team that takes care of things that happen at this level, at this, you know what I mean? Because there are a lot of these things where it's like, that's great. Bob says he can't do that because that's how it is. That's how it is. But we need to have some way that we tackle larger issues, even if that's just having somebody who's listening to what's happening at that larger level and replying back to and keeping us informed of those changes.
I mean, I guess that one, I guess too, if it means upstream of the meter, so between the city, between the gate station and the meter, that's within our control. If it means the broader upstream of the gate station, that's kind of out of our. So, I mean, I think there are a number, I guess in the gas utility, they have various grades of leaks, a grade 1 leak gets repaired.
Right.
Maybe even a grade 2, but they probably got an inventory of grades 3s and 4s, which are smaller that, they keep on the books. I think that's what this is maybe trying to get to is.
Okay. And do I have, so this, you said between the gate station and the meter, that's what is one category of like potential leak areas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're saying those are tracked, those sort of leaks, and are they quantified in any way of like we're losing this much gas or anything like that?
I think so. I don't know to what specificity, but in order to classify them, I think they do have to do some quantification of them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They have a contractor, I think, that is constantly going around the city doing leak surveys and.
Okay.
My assumption would be, hey, we've got a grade. This is uninformed, but we got a grade 4 leak. Okay, we can leave it because it's not posing danger to infrastructure, to human lives.
Right.
But if we let that grade 4 leak go for 2 years, it may emit as much methane as a grade 1 leak over the course of 2 days. So I think that's kind of what it's getting to.
Yeah.
Okay. I do know that as part of our greenhouse gas emissions inventory, this is something that's been on the list of like something we should be incorporating into like what our sort of greenhouse gas emissions picture is, but we haven't done that before. So there might be something there on the quantification part, but maybe we can get more specific with that later. Okay. Offset emissions from older city buildings that could not be made neutral. So this would be an actual purchase of carbon offsets. I think this goes along with the strategy above. I don't want to scroll all over the place, but that was about net zero, city buildings and that sort of thing. So definitely a longer term strategy. Any thoughts on this?
Well, I know there is, I guess there has been discussions going on for at least the past year on purchasing, I guess.
Offsets, yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting. I know in my last job, I looked at offsets as like a huge part of my job, and there's so many considerations to carbon offset purchases beyond even just price of like what kind of offset it is, what project it is, where it came from, like all this. So one recommendation might be to make this more about like before we even buy the offsets, we need to have some sort of maybe down the line develop some sort of criteria for what kind of offsets the city thinks are like good offsets to account for like our emissions or something.
We were talking earlier about LEED being kind of yes, it is good, but it is also an industry. International development to develop projects that hey, now we can sell offsets because we've built this this dam or whatever it may be. Well, okay, you just took away prairie grazing area for indigenous peoples. Way to go, So yeah. I think that's critical.
Cool.
I would also be curious on this one if there were criteria for defining which city facilities would be eligible for this kind of offset. And I think it's a great tool that we should have in our tool belt, but I don't know that it's just going to be age as a factor. It might also be function or what the city facility is trying to do, if it's able to be neutral or not. But rather than keeping this as vague of we can use offsets when we can't have a facility achieve neutral, defining specifically which buildings may fall into that category and then using that tool if needed.
And I think that requires analysis of if a carbon offset for 1 ton costs this, and for us to eliminate the same amount in a city building costs this, well, the decision should be made to do the offset. So that's what the question is where is that line drawn where we're just throwing money at a problem versus, this building's going to be replaced in 12 years anyways. Why are we putting energy efficiency into it when it costs more than an offset would cost, so long as that offset has been proven to be equitable, et cetera.
Definitely. Yep. This is, man, any of y'all that want to, once I have this baby, get a beer and talk about offsets, I'm there.
I got you.
Okay. Require city fleet, gas utility, etc., to report monthly and I'm assuming and annual carbon emissions with incentives / penalties for performance above or below an established benchmark. Dang. Well, I think one change I would just recommend from our office is we actually do the quantification of the emissions. So I think that'd probably be something that we continue to do and then provide that information to each entity or department or something, sort of like an internal carbon fee or bill or whatever, not getting into like that right now, but the first step is actually knowing department by department what your emissions are. So that I think I would recommend is like strategy number 1 here. Beyond that, any other
well, I see 3 things that jump out at me. I mean, one, I guess we've got gas utilities, stormwater utilities, sewer utility. We left off the water utility.
Okay, yeah.
And I don't know whether, I mean, we're in a city fleet, so I guess that's
And fleet is a service to other departments. So that's going to be hard to say, you know, here's the carrot, here's the stick for fleet, when all they're doing is, you know, providing for the needs of other departments.
Mhm. That's true. I think the list, I'm just gonna say the list of departments are, you
And
know,
the other one,
needs
I
to be
guess,
defined.
is incentives and penalties. So how are we going to incentivize and penalize ourselves?
Right.
Right.
Hey, you're doing a bad job. We're going to take away more money from you in the budget
Yeah.
process, which means you buy
And-
older. Right.
And then the other piece is, you know, the big electricity consumers, the wastewater utility and the water utility, you know, are somewhat dependent on weather and wholesale customer demands, you know.
Mhm.
So, you know, a dry summer or whatever, dry hot summer, we're going to pump more water than a wet mild summer. And likewise, the wastewater utility, when we get into a wet period like we've been in here for months now, you know, they're going to be running
Right.
plant full tilt every day, you know, just about, you know, and it's going to look a lot different energy consumption wise than if we're in a drought. You know?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's why I would remove incentives and penalties and replace it more with reporting and reasons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just, hey, there was a bunch of snow this summer and you guys ran your trucks more than you normally would. Okay, there's a penalty, but an accountability of, hey, what's this blip? And an informed manager will say, that is a result of the additional services we had to provide due to. And then everybody goes, okay, you're doing your job and you know why you have more.
Yeah.
I think that's ideal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Brecken Parks log a lot more miles because we had a storm come through and they got tree limbs down all over
Right.
the city. You know?
Right.
And then maybe as an additional sort of step, Jeff, to what you were just saying is maybe there are low hanging fruit though in that sort of thing where it's like, you know what, we discovered part of this is like no one's following the anti-idling policy. Let's just
Yeah.
like do that
Exactly.
instead of, you know, pick up that stuff first before we start penalizing because we don't even understand what's happening.
Right.
And then what I was also wondering, how would you all feel about making, if let's say eventually we figure out how to do this, making this information public is like a, you know, transparency sort of thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That, and also I behoove that doing it period by period or monthly is tough, but there's already a built-in quarterly KPI tracking for folks who do performance-based budgeting. So I think that including a lot of these measurements in what you're doing for performance-based budgeting would be key, because what we don't want to do is just, hey, here's a new thing you have to track and a new format you got to present it to city council in. You know what I mean? We want things to be holistic. We already have a place where we have key performance indicators. Then let's make this a key performance indicator. You know, let's not make a whole new report that I need half a position to track. Let's put it all part and parcel.
Cool.
There is definitely seasonal variability to
Mhm.
Right.
utilities, energy consumption. You know, the streetlight grid obviously consumes more energy in December and January than it does in June and July, just because there's more hours of darkness.
Yeah.
You know, conversely, the Doug Towns water plant might be, you know, averaging 55 million gallons a day this time of year, but in July it could be averaging 75, 80, you know,
Mm-hmm.
85, you know. So.
Okay, let's keep moving. All right, the next two have to do with fleet, and I know there's already some stuff underway here that I'm not super familiar with, but we have rewrite the fleet operations manual to require all new vehicle purchase to be electric vehicles, and I don't know, I can't remember what the B and the H stand for, where those options exist, and then also identify places for electric vehicle charging on municipal parking lots. So there is a fleet, and Adam, you might know more about this actually. There's some sort of fleet, there's something going on here already, right?
Yeah, oh, I think the B is battery and H, I'm guessing. it's
Hybrid, that's
but,
what it is. Yeah.
yeah, and that was gonna be my comment on the next two, is they have that Richmond Clean and Green Fleet Report.
Mhm.
And these are very similar to the recommendations that are included in that report, but
Okay.
maybe just a little bit different. And so I feel like it might be beneficial to have this mirror that report exactly, as opposed to being sort of the same, but a little different.
Okay, I think that works. If yeah, yeah, I know there's a lot of work that has already gone into that, so I think that sounds good. Okay, I do want to. I'm just gonna try to speed us up a little. Sorry. Incorporate climate projections into land use, building regulations, and capital investments in order to identify opportunities to reduce emissions or enhance. Okay, this is a lot. This is too broad.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've already addressed this on the energy efficiency side. We definitely have a ton on that. On the capital investment side and climate projections, I feel like we had something like that already.
A little redundant.
Yeah.
This is the one, I think, around like city operations and climate impacts. So what we could do is say also include capital projects
Mm-hmm.
considerations or something like that, just to streamline this a little bit. And I think that would cover us on this one. Let me just, sorry, finish this note real quick. Any other thoughts on that though? Whoops.
I'd color that one gray just so
We don't.
when they're reviewing, they know that this is kind of rolled into another one.
Yeah, good idea. Okay. Meet municipal electricity demand with renewable energy on-site utility supplied or contracted, which I think is in the mayor's.
You know, we're kind of moving, or at least in discussions of moving in that direction.
Yeah.
Various initiatives, from the on-site small solar to purchasing RECs or whatever.
Right. Yeah. Okay. There's some specific language there that I think, similar to the fleet stuff, we could just take that. It's something like by a certain year it'll be 50%, and then by another year it'll be 100% something.
It's more of a goal than a strategy, I'd say.
Yes. Oh, that's totally true. Yes.
It's a good goal.
And we're figuring out how to do it right now. So
That's right.
that's
That's
the
right.
strategy. Okay. Offer training programs to build the local and clean energy workforce. I don't think this falls under municipal operations necessarily.
I think from a community, from what different departments do as far as community wealth building and economic development, that this would fall under this category.
Okay.
I know it's very specific, but I love this one, and it has to end up somewhere, is all I'm saying.
Okay, cool.
I know there's some discussion about, I guess RPS owns the old Altria leaf processing plant on Maury Street across from the DPU Op Center. And there's talk about, you know, renovating that into, you know, some sort of a tech center type high school.
Tech school, right?
With J-Sarge, maybe that would provide programs along the lines of this goal. So.
And would that be an RPS? Like, is the city still involved in that, like building it? Like,
the city's involved to the extent that they fund RPS's
renovations, if they did that sort of thing.
Renovations and operations, and you know, it all comes out of the city budget. So.
And it was the Maury Leaf something. I'm sorry.
Maury, I guess Altria Maury Street facility. Yeah.
And also, I think that that's an important one where we can really highlight equity in the faces that you see in these programs. You know, it's not, hey, we've done equity. It's hey, you know, 80% of all people in this program have to be from underserved neighborhoods, et cetera. That's somewhere where we can really make an impact past 2050. I love that one personally.
Cool. Well, yeah, I don't want to get rid of it. So Jeff, how can we make this more, we have 5 minutes. How can we make this more of a strategy then? Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, is it
partner with,
Or maybe invest.
partner with Dominion, partner with other local organizations, I think would be key.
Partner and invest in training programs rather than offer, you know?
Yes, yes. Or develop training programs in tandem with community partners.
Right.
And then say, hey, Dominion, wouldn't you love to pay a $100,000 grant so that we can have this training program annually?
And then do you think there's maybe a pipeline here to city jobs somehow that we could work in from like the municipal operations end? We don't have to figure out what that is now, but maybe that could be part of it.
That's a question for Mr. Stone, but I like the idea of exploring it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent is that as there's broader implementation of, you know, various green technologies from solar to energy efficiency, you know, that we're helping to train and supply the workforce that is going to do that work.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then the last one, establish a local energy resource center, which is kind of, I think, could be related to the one before about like training and stuff, but maybe this is more on the education side too. Maybe it could be combined somehow.
Yeah, I like the combination
Okay.
of having a physical place where these things happen. So when you guys want to do an in-person training on weatherization or something like that, where does that happen? Okay, that happens at the Maury Street, you know, Center for Energy Innovation or whatever the heck you want to call it, you know? But
and I think not just a physical thing, but also an online information repository.
Yeah.
Of local resources, of you know, minority-owned energy professionals who can do, you know, your energy efficiency analysis for your home, et cetera, et cetera. I see how these big, broad, beautiful, awesome, expensive ideas get put on here, because once you get rolling, they're all connected and they're, you know, easy to put on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So we made it through our list. Congratulations, you guys. So we talked about equity the whole time. And Jeff, I really appreciate all of your comments and like keeping us on that mode of thinking. What I want to do just in the couple minutes we have left is think about, you know, I think we identified definitely a few places where some of these can contribute to government accountability through transparency initiatives. We have a couple things now that would contribute to things like jobs. I think because we're dealing generally with city facilities, we're not going to get as much into the affordable housing aspect. So that is probably a little lower in terms of trying to like squeeze something in there. But I wanted to see if anyone else had thoughts on any of these other topics. So any opportunities just generally on anything that we talked about related to jobs, maybe like neighborhood resources and health, anything like that that comes to mind. And I know you, well, you have the spreadsheet if you want to look through the list of what we have now, but that's what we're supposed to do.
I think the big question is, anybody see any negative aspects in any of these things with any of these recommendations? Off the top of my head, I do not. But as you guys, as we've shown together, these are all nuanced. So
yeah, one thing I might propose just as a general kind of thing would be for the strategies where we had a couple that were like looking at the whole portfolio of city buildings and property. maybe there's something where we could say, you know, in the prioritization of projects, looking at the ones that actually serve the public, you know,
Right.
being a criteria for like, oh, let's make this more healthy and energy efficient first before we maybe go to something that's exclusively an office building, something like that. That's my only thought at this point.
The decision making that I'm thinking of is, would we rather improve the 10th floor finance offices, or would we rather employ and improve the health and efficiency of the first floor, where people come in and they interact with us? I think that's super key, Brianne.
Cool. Okay, so I'll look for places to add that in here.
Mhm.
But any other thoughts? We have about 30 seconds.
Or would we rather get rid of City Hall altogether and build a new
Exactly.
center?
And just make a bunch of smaller, like nicer, welcoming spaces.
We can make, yeah.
I want to purchase old City Hall from the state and have it be state of the art inside and old school outside. But, you know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. I know this is a long time, but I think this is totally worth it. And we will be back with this stuff in a few weeks after others look at it. So thank you.
Thank you.